The 2019 NFL Draft is 4 years into their careers, and looking back, this was an interesting draft class to say the least. 11 players that were selected in the first round have become Pro Bowlers, which is pretty true to the old adage of first-round picks, where one-third are above-average players, one-third are average, and one-third are draft busts. And in today's video, we are going to grade picks 32 through 17 in reverse order, so we will be starting with the selection of Patriots receiver N'Keal Harry at 32, and finishing with the Giants selection of defensive tackle with Dexter Lawrence at pick 17. And with 16 picks to dive into, let's begin. N'Keal Harry was the final pick in the first round of the 2019 NFL Draft, and this was supposed to be a solid, big-bodied weapon for then Patriots quarterback Tom Brady. He was supposed to complement Julian Edelman, and they were going to hit the ground running, or at least that was the plan. And out of all of the 2019 receivers that were selected in the second round, like Deebo Samuel, A.J. Brown, and DK Metcalf, the Patriots chose the wrong receiver. He was eventually traded from the Pats to the Bears for just a 7th round pick, and during his time in New England, he hauled in 57 passes for 598 yards and 4 touchdowns over the course of 3 seasons. He started in just 18 games for the Patriots, and this is an F. Tackle Kaleb McGary was given a 3-year extension this offseason, and it was not due to the first few years of his career. Kaleb really improved in 2022 as he allowed a career-low 19 pressures and played at a higher level. The Falcons' 2022 run game wasn't solely due to McGary, as Chris Lindstrom plays a big part on the offensive line as well, but he did play a big part, McGary, that is. He went through the typical struggles a young offensive lineman does at the NFL level, which was highlighted by allowing 13 sacks as a rookie back in 2019. The Falcons did not pick up his 5th-year option, meaning he was a free agent after 2022, had they not worked out a deal, which kind of shows how he played in the first 3 years. I give this a B- because you have to factor in how much he struggled early on. I hope he has a good next year to build on what he did in 2022. The Giants had their 3rd first-round pick of the night with corner Deandre Baker, and Baker was released prior to the start of his 2nd season due to being arrested under the charges of armed robbery and aggravated assault with a firearm. The charges were eventually dropped, and Baker played sparingly for the Chiefs over the next 2 years. He did not play in 2022 for any team, and over the course of the 26 games he played in his career, this is for both Kansas City and the Giants, he allowed 10 touchdowns to 0 interceptions and allowed a 128.0 passer rating when being targeted. This grade is an F. Seattle had a run of first-round picks that were very abnormal, and Rashad Penny in 2018 and L.J. Collier in 2019 were examples of this. Collier was an older prospect coming out in the 2019 draft as he turned 24 in September of his rookie season, and LJ never panned out as a player, and this offseason agreed to a 1-year deal with the division rival Cardinals. Watch out for a revenge game next year when the teams play, and all jokes aside, Collier had 40 tackles in 4 years with Seattle and played in 45 games during his time with the Seahawks, which equates to less than a tackle per game. He has 3 career sacks and only started 16 games during this time frame, and as a first-round pick, you can probably guess this is an F. Tillery was drafted by the Chargers and was flat-out released during the 2022 regular season. He was picked up by the Raiders and even re-signed for the 2023 season, with the Raiders that is. And I know the initial thought is this is an F because he was flat-out released, but the production from Tillery wasn't as bad as one might think. No, he wasn't good, and I'm not advocating in even the slightest way that this was a hit for the Chargers, because it wasn't, but he had 2 seasons with 30-plus pressures for the Chargers, and even had a 4.5 sack season in 2021, and also had 51 tackles, which, again, isn't bad. This isn't anywhere close to a C, I just don't think it's an F grade, and to just leave it at that. Having said all of this, 4 years later, the Tillery grade is a D. Johnathan Abram, to me, was a player that was drafted into a bad situation and a player that should have never been a Raider. His strengths as a player did not align with what the team needed, and he was picked on early and often in coverage. And per PFF lifetime, he has allowed 111 receptions for over 1,250 yards and 11 touchdowns on just 147 targets. This is all while allowing a passer rating of 117.1. Abram, like Tillery, was released in November of 2022, and like with Tillery, this pick isn't an automatic F because it didn't work out. Abram actually had a year where he had over 110 tackles, and while he wasn't a hit by any means, there's far worse misses than Abram, and 4 years later we give this pick a D+. Montez Sweat of the Commanders, then Redskins defensive line, was always a dream fit as they drafted Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen in previous years. Chase Young the following year was icing on the cake. But for Sweat specifically, he has 29 sacks in 4 years, and not only is coming off of a solid 8-sack season in 2022, but also had his 5th-year option exercised, meaning he will start for the franchise for at least 5 years, and I do think they will work out a long-term contract for him. You can never be disappointed with a player that, thinking out loud, if he starts for them for the next few years, could reasonably have 55 or 60 sacks for the team. A solid pick, and this gets a B+ grade. Marquise Brown was the Ravens' first-round pick, and this is truly difficult to grade because I think this is a classic case of a player that is better than what his production shows. Playing in the Ravens' offense was always going to limit him statistically, which is why Hollywood privately requested a trade, which the Ravens granted, and they received a first-round pick back for him, and by the way, drafted Tyler Linderbaum, a future Pro Bowl center, in the process. Hollywood had over 2,300 yards of production and 21 receiving touchdowns while getting a high pick back, to me at least is an A. This isn't a typical pick to grade because of the situation, and if you were grading it solely on his time with the Ravens, while not factoring in the trade, it would be more along the lines of a B- or B area. It's really hard to be upset about a first-round running back that's went for over 1,000 rushing yards in 3 of his first 4 years, including a first-team All-Pro in 2022. Within 2022, Josh Jacobs also went for over 2,000 total yards and led the league in rushing. And what's important to remember with Josh is for how good he was this past year, he was not that player over the first 3 years of his career. And I don't want to overreact and give this an A+, because truth be told, I don't think it's an A+ pick. He is going to get a good grade, but as of now, the 2022 Josh Jacobs is an outlier relative to the rest of his career. 4 years later, we give this an A. Tackle Tytus Howard was viewed as an overdrafted prospect as he was the first Alabama State player ever to be selected in the first round. Weirdly enough, within the Texans fanbase, they are a little too critical at times of Tytus, which is kind of weird because he's a solid player, but not a top-tier Hall of Fame player. And we'll get a little more into this with the player that was selected before Tytus, but for as bad as the Texans have been over the past few years, Tytus has allowed just 5 sacks while playing 3 different offensive line positions in 2021 and 2022. He significantly outperformed what I thought he was going to do in the initial draft reactions and process, and 4 years later, the Tytus Howard selection is a B+. Everyone knew the Texans wanted tackle Andre Dillard at pick 23, and weirdly enough, Tytus Howard was a better pick for them than Dillard was for the Eagles, and Philadelphia actually traded up in front of Houston with Baltimore, so there was a swap between picks 22 and 25. Andre Dillard missed a whole season due to injury back in 2020, and is now a member of the Titans. Even when he played, he wasn't great, and as a first-round pick for the Eagles, in the 3 seasons he played, he started just 9 games. To date, Dillard has played just 736 career snaps, and for reference, Tytus Howard played 997 snaps in 2022 alone. Dillard was a miss by most of the draft community, myself included, and 4 years later, this is an F. Safety Darnell Savage from Maryland was the Packers' second first-round pick of the night, the other being Rashawn Gary at number 12 overall. Savage had a pretty solid first 2 years, and while he wasn't going to be a premier top 3 or 4 safety, he could have been an above-average starter for quite some time. Unfortunately, he has regressed big time over the past 2 years, and as Packers fans know, he misses a ton of tackles. The plays were there early on, but over time they occurred less and less, and bad play came up more and more frequently. Some Packers fans think it's due to defensive coordinator Joe Barry, as they have their justifiable frustrations with him. Savage has really trended down over the past few years, and 4 years later this pick is a C. Noah Fant is now a member of the Seahawks and was the second Iowa tight end drafted in the first round after former Hawkeye teammate TJ Hockenson went at number 8 overall. Because Fant was a part of a trade, this isn't a typical draft pick to grade, and I thought he kind of underperformed as a first round tight end. I also don't think it was entirely his fault in Denver, as the quarterback play was certainly lacking at times, but there has never been a point where Fant has been viewed as an elite tight end, and at this point, I don't think there ever will be. For the Broncos pick, I would give this a C+, because they did get decent production out of him, as he had 2 600-yard seasons, but again, he was never one of the league's best tight ends, and him catching just 10 touchdowns in 3 seasons as a first-round pick is a tad disappointing. Jeffrey Simmons was arguably a top 5 draft prospect before tearing his ACL in the pre-draft process, and as expected, it takes guys a little while to figure it out in the trenches, and it did for Jeffrey too. He became a Pro Bowler for the first time in his 3rd season, in which he had 66 pressures and 8.5 sacks from the defensive tackle position. He had 7.5 sacks in year 4, or 2022, and as of now, Simmons is a 2-time second-team All-Pro player and a 2-time Pro Bowler. He will play the 2023 season at just 26 years old, and we could very easily be looking at a first-round pick who makes 6 or 7 Pro Bowls in his career and even has a first-team All-Pro or 2. The Titans hit on this pick, and it is an A+. Center Garrett Bradbury, as weird as this is going to sound, only weighs 300 pounds, which is undersized for the center position. There's been times in his career where he's been bullied, and it's shown. However, he improved in 2022 and earned a 3-year contract extension this offseason. Is he a Pro Bowl level player? No, and he's had his fair share of struggles. But it's looking like the Vikings are going to get a 7-year starter out of a first-round pick if he plays this contract out. And after, who knows? Which makes this difficult to grade because he's about average as a player, which is more than you can say about a lot of first-round picks. And 4 years later, we give this a B-. Dexter Lawrence is up, and this is not an easy pick to grade because you had to know what you were signing up for when this pick was made. Like we said with Jeffrey Simmons, it takes guys time to develop on the interior, and 2022 was the first year where we really saw Dexter break out, as he had 7.5 sacks, made the Pro Bowl, and was a second-team All-Pro player. He had a slower start to his career than the Giants probably would have liked, especially by year 3, but he is now that guy, and teams have to game plan around their defensive line. He had 7 pressures against the Vikings in a playoff win for the Giants, including a big one where Kirk Cousins was forced to check down to TJ Hockenson with the game on the line. Those types of plays do not show up on the stat sheet for guys like Dexter. I think this is an A grade, but I truly think the best is yet to come for him. And that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as it would mean the world and help the growth of the channel a ton. Until next time, as always, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.